of course, he wrote the Narnia series that most people are familiar with. He was a Christian. He wrote these words: "I've been reading poems, romances, visual literature, legends and myths all my life. I know what they are like. I know none of them are like this. Of this gospel text, there are only two possible views. Either this is reportage, or else some unknown ancient writer, without known predecessors or successors, suddenly anticipated the whole technique of modern novelistic, realistic narrative." In other words, he's saying that these aren't myths because they're too real and too out of the genre of what we know to be novels that came much later on in history to be considered novel. You know, since the Da Vinci Code, which is a work of fiction, most of us have blindly swallowed this idea that the Bible isn't historically reliable. But if we look at the evidence, we can exercise a rational faith in the historicity of Scripture. Ian referred to this, that they were written a long time after the accounts of Jesus' life. But they weren't evolving, anonymous, collective oral traditions and legends that sort of came from nowhere. The timing of the Gospels is actually far too early for them to be considered myths or legends. They were written within about 40 to 60 years of Jesus' death. You know, within the lifetime of the witnesses that gave the accounts that became what we know as the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And then the letters to the churches were written some 15 to 25 years after Jesus' death. Again, it's within the lifetime, within the generation of the actual eyewitnesses. Now, why that's important is because it means that these witnesses, the Gospels, were circulating within the lifetime of the people that gave the stories, that who actually saw what Jesus did and witnessed his life. The Gospel author Luke claims to have got Jesus' life story from eyewitnesses who were still alive. That was to reassure the readers of its authenticity. Paul writes that there were some 500 witnesses to the resurrection. Well, you can't write that sort of thing in a document that's meant to be used for public distribution unless it's true, because there'll be one of those 500 or so out there who will want to say that this is all garbage, and the documents themselves wouldn't have survived the early years of the church. But what we see is that it did survive, it did grow, it did flourish. It's oral history. Now, in terms of miracles and those sorts of things, Jesus ascending into heaven, well, to say that miracles are impossible is, of course, a philosophical presupposition and not a scientific finding. Because scientific findings can only look at natural causes, natural effects in the natural world. They're the only kind of cause that science can address. But that doesn't prove that there can't be any other cause in the world, such as supernatural causes. It doesn't prove that. The other hidden premise in saying that miracles are impossible is that it's saying that there can't be a God who does miracles. But if there is a creator God, and let's just entertain for a moment that there is a God, well, then there's nothing illogical or irrational at all about the possibility of miracles. To be sure that miracles cannot occur, you have to be sure beyond all doubt that God or some supernatural thing doesn't exist, and we can't say that. So we can't be sure that miracles are impossible. To say so is actually a step of faith, a philosophical presupposition. We're working with the same tools here. The existence of God can be neither proven or disproven. So there's no war between science and religion. They're understood to be answering different questions. Science is answering the how questions, and religion is answering the why, the epistemological questions of why. There's no war between those, and in fact, many scientists over the years have been Christians. Let me just say to finish that the basic misconception is that Christianity is only for good people. But Jesus said that no one is good except for God alone. Christianity is actually for people who recognise that they're bad. And we do see a lot of bad things done in the name of religion, but we also see bad things done in the name of secular governments as well. Communist Russia, Chinese, Cambodian regimes of the 20th century all rejected or any organised form of religion and belief in God. And their forerunner was, of course, the French Revolution, which rejected traditional religion for human reason, for logic and rationality. And these societies were all secular and rational, but they produced massive violence against their own people without the influence of religion. Here's what happens. J.K. Chesterton said, when a person stops believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they'll believe in anything. And so what happens is, when the idea of God is gone, a society will make something else their ultimate thing. Some other concept will simply fill the void, because we're created for worship. Something fills the void in order for that society to appear morally or spiritually superior. So Marxists made the state their absolute, the Nazis made race and heritage their absolute, and so even ideals of liberty, equality, tolerance can be used in a way to force violence on their opponents. Thank you.
I've got a couple of announcements, but first, on behalf of the Section Study, I'd like to thank Danny Saunders for speaking for the Christian Union. We've got a gift here.
On behalf of the Christian Union, I'd like to thank Ian Robinson for speaking as well.
We'll just have a couple of plugs before you go, and we'll go up and get some pizza. For those of you who found themselves agreeing with Ian Robinson, why not consider joining the Rational Society of Australia? There's pamphlets around, and membership also includes subscription to the fantastic Australian Rationalists, the Journal of Australian Rationalists, Australian Rationalist Journal. I've got a few copies to have a look at a couple of things. And also at 4:30 today on Sin FM 90.7, myself and Noni Flynn from the Christian Union are being interviewed about this debate, so you can tune in and have a listen to that.
And if you tuned in and had listened to that and wanting to hear more about Christianity or God and suffering, Danny Saunders is running a discussion in the Corcoran Irish pub next to the law building on Pelham Street and Leicester Street, and we're going to be talking about how can a good God allow suffering. So come and join us for a meal and a drink and discussion. Thanks.
Thank the speakers again, and we'll go get pizza.